Hello and welcome to our second edition of GCS Cyber and GCS Connect. Today we've got a really exciting talk, and thank you for everyone who's joined in. There's a lot of attendees today. This is our biggest by far. So as we go through this webinar, if you've got any questions at any time, feel free to jump them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer. Now, today is a topic that is spoken about a lot, but very briefly. And the aim of today is to go into as much detail as possible around the effects of AI in cybersecurity. We are joined by three industry-leading professionals, and those will be on screen very shortly. Now, firstly, what I want to do is say a huge thank you to GCS Cyber, our community, for constantly following, liking, and supporting our profile. And also, this could not be possible without GCS Connect and the whole wider GCS community. Now, let's get started. The first person that I would like to introduce is our first guest. He's a cloud security professional, previously collected awards such as CISO of the Year. He writes about cyber and AI security, and also creating your own AI cybersecurity brands. He's also a cybersecurity educator with over 14,000 students and has published 3 books, including AI Governance in Cybersecurity, which should link very useful for today. So Taimur Ijlal, I'm going to introduce you now and you should be on screen. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Jack. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for joining. This should be a great talk, and that will lead me on to introducing our second guest. Jennifer Cox is the security engineering manager at Tenable, 18 years of experience in technology and in the cybersecurity industry. She's the head of communications for Cyber Women in Ireland and also ambassador for Ventur's global mentorship program. She has spoken at some pretty cool events as well, including Besides Dublin, Women Tech Global, and also Cisco Women in Cybersecurity. So I'd like to introduce you now. Are you there, Jennifer? Can you hear me okay?
How are you, Jack? How are you, Taimur?
Very well. It's a pleasure to see you again. And one more introduction, last but not least, I would like to introduce Arron Dowdeswell, Principal Security Consultant at SureCloud. Arron is a regular feature on their SureCloud Cybersecurity podcast as well. And he's spent his entire life in cybersecurity, going from pen testing all the way to acting CISO with fellow clients at SureCloud. That also includes training, transformation, and risk propositions. In the past, Arron has proudly supported some of the world's largest events and developed countrywide security training networks and programs, and has worked on cybersecurity architectures for various environments. So welcome, Arron.
Hi there, Jack. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, let's get started. And again, thank you all for attending. We've got a lot of questions and hopefully a lot of comments that will come through via our community. So as already mentioned, I'll do my best, or we will do our best to answer those. And if you've got any direct questions, feel free to at the guys specifically, just so I'm directing the questions at the right people that are of interest for yourself. Now, AI. It's a huge topic, and we want to make sure that we're going down the right avenues today, specifically for cybersecurity. It's a very hot topic. It's constantly in the news. It's constantly everywhere on LinkedIn. Every post includes it if you're in the cybersecurity community and AI environment. So, Arron, I think I'd love to start with you and for you to kick us off. For you, maybe let's start with the basics. Let's go back to what is AI for yourself, and how would you describe the different types of AI that we see today in the world, and also specifically to the industry?
Yeah, it sounds like a basic question, but actually what is AI is sort of that $1 million question, because we're at that point in our progression in terms of trying to understand what really constitutes intelligence. Is everything we're currently seeing really AI? Is the digital assistant on your phone, Siri or Cortana or something like that, are they AI now? Because it seems to be a term that's thrown around an awful lot. The way to really classify AI, I suppose, is I would say AI is a goal. It's not one particular thing. And what you do to achieve that goal is a set of technical components. So that could be things like, you've heard large language models, which are a mechanism for machine learning, which are a superset of something like deep learning and neural networks. So you kind of get this layered approach of all of these constituent elements that are essentially code algorithms that build up to a whole, which if you get to the point of it being considered intelligent enough, and intelligence is really the really hard one to define here in the artificial intelligence acronym. Once you get to that point where we are satisfied it's intelligent, then you could say all of these components have made something that is considered artificial intelligence.
No, thank you. I think that's a great start to open up the floor. I think, Jennifer, from your perspective, looking at AI specifically, we're looking at the cybersecurity lens now from your expertise. What would you add to that to kind of define AI within the context of the industry that we're all in?
Yeah, so when it comes to cybersecurity, we've more of a tendency to lean into the generative AI side of things. We've got the biggest challenge for people often and almost always in cybersecurity is the volume of things that they have to defend against. And when you talk about like a human using any piece of software, if there's attack and targeting then they need to make sure that they're prioritizing all the tasks that they have. And what we've seen is really an exponential growth in the number of attacks, the number of points of exposure that people are trying to protect themselves against, which as a mere mortal, as we say, is difficult to be able to prioritize that work and be able to choose where you're most likely to be targeted or just work all that information out manually. So when we use something like generative AI in cybersecurity, really what we're doing is we're doing all of that so much faster. And the goal, at least from the positive side of it, you're going to have the negatives and the positive, but the goal from a defensive viewpoint is to be able to use all of that information as quickly as possible via the algorithms that you'd have in place to be able to identify those points, the weakest points, all of them, and then which ones that you want to be targeting from a remedy perspective in order of priority then from there. So whilst all of them are relevant, in the generative AI is the one that we're seeing the most impactful as early as possible on the cybersecurity side.
Okay, yeah, really interesting. And I think from an industry perspective, if I come to you next, Taimur, about obviously the different types, I know Jennifer's mentioned them there. Do you think that will change drastically over the next kind of 2 to 3 years, or do you think we're going to be on kind of like a consistent trajectory, and what types of AI are used within business at the moment?
Yeah, so when we talk about AI, like my colleague said earlier, right, it's all about making systems intelligent, right? I mean, that's the entire, popularity of AI comes from. I mean, a few decades ago, I guess the pocket calculator would have seemed like AI to a lot of people, right? Because it was doing a lot of things nobody could have imagined. But now what we are seeing with this huge inflection point in a couple of months with this whole generative AI that has come out. AI used to be something which seemed very technical and something which was like very, embedded within products, and you needed a lot of technical power and computing power. But now with generative AI, it's just, with the browser, you can get the access to that power. And of course, that has a lot of implications from cybersecurity. And I think it's not just, it is going to evolve considerably in the coming months. We have experimental things like autonomous AI, like things like AutoGPT and Agent GPT, and those are moving. Like currently, we have use cases like prompt to text or prompt to images, prompt to video. And once we go down to the prompt to the tasks, where you just give an AI like a prompt and it starts doing work by itself, that can have serious security implications also. So it's a very, scary and exciting time to be alive within the cybersecurity world.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see it, and you might agree or disagree. I would love to hear on the comments as well. For me, it's a bit of both. It's slightly scary, but slightly exciting at the same time. I think the autonomous world that we live in now, and the accessibility, right? I'm in my home now. There's probably 5, 6 devices that's in my house, and like a lot that are using AI in some way, linked to the technology, which also could be a threat, which from the average person who doesn't work within cybersecurity or even technology might be a problem to actually identify and raise awareness for and be aware of the impacts. Now, that moves me on. I think I'm going to come back to Arron on the dangers. And I know you obviously mentioned generative AI just there, and maybe we'll start with that and looking at the everyday devices, the everyday use of AI, and what sort of dangers with today's AI innovations do you think they are on a whole scale?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that I would see it from two different sides. You've got the dangers from the perspective of what are people going to use AI for? What are the bad things they could do? And that's kind of an open book, really. They'll use it to assist wherever they see most relevant. If you think about it from an attacker's perspective, I'm a bad guy trying to get into a network. If an AI has the ability to automate part of that exploit chain for me, I'm going to use it to do that. But this isn't really new. There's been a degree of automation, at the very least, in cybersecurity for a long time. Everything from network port scanners to vulnerability scanners to begin to build exploit chains in tool sets such as Metasploit. So I think AI is just a natural progression of that. It's going to make jobs easier and the bar to launching an attack easier. But where I'm more interested, I suppose, in the dangers, where I am now in my career at least, is actually what's it going to mean for people that are using AI and organizations that are having to navigate through this world where everyone knows what AI is and everyone can go and talk to ChatGPT or a digital assistant of some sort that has a wealth of knowledge. And the danger to me is people start sharing too much information with these without knowing about whether there's a license agreement in place, what the privacy policy is of the particular digital assistant they're using, and what's that AI doing in terms of returning data. Is it infringing on intellectual property rights? Is it just copying things from somewhere that you don't have the right to have access to? Is it storing all the data that you're exchanging with it and invading privacy? If you're sharing intellectual property with that AI and that AI is storing that online, I think for me, that's where the real danger is from an organization. I mean, the attacking and defending, that game of cat and mouse, AI is going to be used for good and bad. But actually, what are the users? What are people going to do to interact with AI? And how are organizations going to get ahead of the game to give guidance, support, safeguards, and a bit of an approach and understanding to how they're going to use AI?
Yeah, and I think, one of the purposes of this podcast and what we're doing constantly on LinkedIn is that awareness around the different things and the implications, but also the benefits of AI. And Jennifer, from your perspective, if we put again the business lens on it, from if I'm a director, if I'm a CEO, if I'm a large figure within an organization, and I'm wanting to implement AI, like a lot of businesses are now, that not necessarily before had the technology experience or seeing technology as being how they're going to expand their business. What would you say, like straight away it comes into your head, bang, that's what we need, that's what you would be telling them to look out for, that's what those steps need to be taken slower, those steps can be quickened up by AI as well?
Well, I think with the best of intentions, we could tell all of those people running all of those companies what not to do. But humans are going to have this curiosity, and they're going to click the button, and they're going to press the thing, and they're going to turn everything on, because that's what we do. And that's why we're probably the biggest risk when it comes to cybersecurity, really. We're not the technology, it's those that are managing it and setting the rules around it. That's where all the faults lie. That said, just leading on as well from what Arron was saying, what I'm noticing is that the regulatory bodies, they're not moving nearly as fast as the technology is. So when you look at, like, the EU had the AI Act proposed in 2021, but it's still not. It was like the 14th of June, I think, that they were to agree to move forward with it. But it's, and now correct me if I'm wrong, Arron, because this is not the area I know as well, but as far as I know, we're still moving forward with it, but there's not any really clear regulations in place around it. And that's where your directors and your CEOs, that's what they're going to lean into. They'll have their legal team look and find out what regulations are there. Where's my responsibility lie? Once I create this data using sources that are available on the internet, do I now own that data? Do we own it as a company? Do we owe money to the people whose data was put up on the internet? And, is this new technology? Is it accessing information behind paywalls, behind banners of privacy and all of these kind of things? And if we don't regulate what it can access, you're talking about regulating the internet, it's a pretty big, challenge. But if we don't regulate what it accesses, then we can't truly know the answers to those questions. So it's the kind of thing that we need to put that regulation in place so early. And I would really like to see those regulatory bodies move so much faster so that we can have those answers. Because right now, since ChatGPT came out, like they said, it took 5 days to get 1 million users on ChatGPT, breaking all of the records all over the world for anything else that was made that big. Even Taylor Swift isn't going to beat those kind of records. But if that's the case, of those 5 million users, you can be pretty sure that not all 5 million of them are absolutely cybersecurity savvy. So then you've got a lot of people that are accessing information and publishing it in places, creating code that they don't really fully understand what it does. That in itself is a risk. And they're probably not worried about regulatory bodies. But if you get a regulatory body in, like the EU, or maybe we have one in our own individual countries, that makes it very clear about where those responsibilities lie, then it's easier to make those decisions as a company, as an individual, as an industry. Then from there, that's where we really need those changes.
Yeah. Okay. And Taimur, you've obviously written the book about the subject, right? Governance and AI. So I'd love to hear sort of what you're thinking from your expert lens on the governance behind it, I guess, and the compliance and frameworks in place. And is this going to slow down the impact AI can have on the world, or is it just going to sit side by side and AI is going to go and the compliance and the governance is always going to be playing catch up?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I confess I wrote the book before ChatGPT came out. So even I did not anticipate just how insane things would get in just a few months. But yeah, one of the biggest challenges that I have seen when trying to implement security controls or governance around AI, that most companies need to understand that AI security does not exist in a vacuum. So you need to have some sort of a governance framework around it. You need to create a working body, and then you can start looking at the technical controls. I've seen that most people jump directly to the technical security controls without making sure that there's a framework around it. But the good news is, Jennifer has correctly mentioned, the regulations are quite behind. They're still catching up. But I think NIST has launched its framework, the AI risk management framework, which is quite good. And I think that's a good step forward as teams are upskilling, because most cybersecurity teams, I've seen that they make one mistake, that they approach AI security like any other security. So they usually look at the security of the underlying platform, and they don't look at the unique risks which AI is introducing, like data poisoning or prompt injections, and those no sort of attacks. So that I think that we are still playing catch up with regards to the wider industry. The teams are catching up, but it'll take a while to get there, I guess.
And because of, I guess, when AI was, jumped on the scene, I think for me, from a non-technical lens, and hopefully, well, there might not be, I'd like to see in the comments as well if people would agree, when ChatGPT came out, that was like, oh, that's like the first bit of AI that I'm, really being exposed to. And I think a lot of people have just seen, oh, well, AI has just come into play now. It's not, has it? We know it's been around for a long time. And I think this where it comes to the education side, but it's interesting. And going back to Jennifer about the laws, the European sector and the laws that are trying to be passed but are taking so long. Why, Taimur, is it that it does take so much time? And why do you think when these things are implemented, that they're allowed to be implemented almost without any governance and regulation? Why does it have to play catch up all the time? Just a curious question.
Yeah, I mean, that has been honestly it's not just unique to AI. I would say that has been the standard. There's a lot of red tape whenever it comes to implementing regulations. And at the same time, they have to strike that rather unique balance. They don't want to stifle innovation, but they don't want to make it too open, unfortunately. And I don't think anybody anticipated the pace at which AI would evolve so fast. I think even the EU regulation, they had to quickly revised it to include like clauses for generative AI, because even they did not anticipate. Just recently it was done, right? So they had to quickly catch up and put these clauses in hurriedly. And I don't know by the time what else would happen. Maybe autonomous AI would catch on. So unfortunately, that red tape, which is there, which takes its sweet time to enact any regulation, that is always played catch up with any technology. But AI is just much more faster than anything else, because it's evolving at such a fast rate. So I guess that's why it's so critical for companies to put in, like, governance frameworks and not wait for regulations to come in. You need to mitigate the risk now, as
Yeah.
opposed to waiting for something to come along. Yeah.
No, that's really, and maybe I'm just being stupid, but I always thought as well, when all the topics came out about governance and compliance and catching up, why don't the AI just create the governance and compliance frameworks? So that's what I see. Also, a couple of people say, I know that might be a stupid question, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to look at the comments. We're going to kind of go back to Fadal is put, how does a business handle people using AI? I know we go back to Jennifer's statement about, we are vulnerable ourselves. We know the percentages around it, of what causes the most attacks. And are they sharing that business information when, AI is being implemented into the company? How does a business handle people using AI for you, Jennifer, and maybe in your business? How do you implement that?
So there's two layers of it as such for us. So we use it obviously within the business when it comes to help them to correlate all that information and give people the viewpoint of identifying where the weak spots are as such. So we want to make sure that people fully understand where the cyber risks are, or their cyber exposure is. So that's great. That's regulated. We know what we want to put into it. It's all intentional with regards to what's being put into it from there. And it's all controlled locally. When it comes to the individuals in the company using it, we've had to define our own business-specific regulations around it as such, with regards letting people know what they can or can't use it for, and letting them know what information that they absolutely cannot put into it. So when it comes to any company, you're not going to want to put in things like your entire book of business for sales. You're not going to want to put in, if you've got any kind of projects that you're working on that you haven't yet finished or released, you're not going to want to put that kind of information in. And it's not because, weirdly enough, it's not because you don't trust the actual technology to use it well. It's down to the humans who get the results out of that technology and their ability to expose anything that you don't want to have exposed there. So at the moment, companies are defining their own rules and regs around what it is that they are willing to allow people use, because I think it's difficult to control their actual use of it. You can ban certain things completely from the company, but there's always going to be somebody somewhere that will find a way of using it or getting information they shouldn't have on it. So if you regulate the information and make it be something that is going to be impactful to that individual in the role. So if I was to fill the book of business and put it into ChatGPT and say, who should I share this with? Then, I should be punished for that. And as a sense, there'd be regulations around that. But I think, like I say, at the moment, the companies are defining their own based on what they're willing to allow the public to know. And that's the way they have to consider it, whatever is going to be used in it. So we'd see salespeople using it to go, how do I upgrade from this version of software to this version of software? What do I do? Because there's some that you'd have to use in between. And they get the full running commentary. So it saves them pulling a resource to ask them for the 50 millionth time the same question that they may have asked them before. That's great. That's a useful use of it. That's saving everybody's time. And that's what we would welcome people using it for. But yeah, it needs to be defined within the companies now until it becomes something that when the regulatory bodies decide what the rules and regs are, then they also are going to decide what the penalties are for those things too. But in order to move quickly with it now, the companies need to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I think it comes from an ethical standpoint as well, doesn't it? About where the governance and compliance is and the regulations. And from your perspective, Arron, if we're thinking about the ethics around AI and what the frameworks are in place at the moment, are we seeing AI becoming more ethical with it? naturally, will the AI just think itself about being more ethical? You know, will it start creating that nice part of the brain which will involve ethics? Do you think?
It's a really good question. I think the answer is both yes and no. Where we are at the moment with AI is that there are suddenly lots of models coming out. And when I say lots of models, I'm not talking about dozens or hundreds. If you go on something like Hugging Tree, they've got, I think, 250,000 AI models on there now. It's like an open source community, and it's exploded. You know, all these different models with about 50,000 different data sets, which could vary from, we've scraped Wikipedia to we've scraped all of the results on Google in size. So the scale of that means that you'll end up with some AIs, at least in the broad sense of what we're seeing AI considered at the moment, large language models, text-to-speech, image generation, using Stable Diffusion, those sorts of things. You're going to end up with some where there's no ethics considered at all. It's just a data model for you to use how you see fit. However, on the opposite end of that, from the small scale ones, the small companies that have just decided to have a go, you've got the kind of market leaders at the moment. And I'd say OpenAI are one of those. They've been very forthcoming with their concerns about AI being on the leading edge of the market. And they've also put forward lots of proposals about how they intend to build ethics into AI using human validation, hiring social scientists to understand the right way to code an AI and put limitations in place to make sure there's always an extra layer of validation. They've got this concept of super intelligence training, I think, that they announced the other day, where they want to use AI to train AI, but based on a set of moral and ethical rules that they've put in place based on social scientists. So there's certainly an intention, I think, for those big players. There will inevitably be, and as with any new industry, you'll get a few companies that end up being the big players, I suspect. You know, just like you do in cloud computing, just like you do in mobile phone manufacturing, AI will probably have something similar like this. And I think those big players will build ethics quite strongly into their propositions, into their offerings. They'll align with global standards. They'll be accredited to all the certifications that you'd expect an organization to be. They'll have privacy policies in place. We're not quite there yet,